The biggest lie about the invention of money. Why barter never actually existed. I'm going to ask you a question, and this question will probably expose one of the biggest lies you've heard in your entire life. How was money invented? Most of us know the same story, right? Primitive people initially relied on barter. You gave me fish, I gave you wheat. But this system was clumsy and inefficient because maybe you didn't need fish but needed bread. And the baker didn't need fish either but wanted meat, so everyone ended up stuck in chaos. That's why one day, smart people supposedly sat down and invented money, gold, silver, and later paper money. So everyone was happy. Trade flourished, economies grew, and civilization advanced. This story is so neat and logical that it's repeated over and over again in economics textbooks, university courses, and even in central bank reports. From Adam Smith to Milton Friedman, from Paul Samuelson to N. Gregory Mankiw, almost every famous economist has supported this story in one way or another. But there's a small problem here. This story is completely, from beginning to end, a lie. A barter economy has never existed in history. No anthropologist, no archaeologist, no historian has ever found such a society. This fact has been known in academic circles for decades, yet it never made its way into mainstream economic narratives. Why? Because this lie is the most fundamental source of legitimacy for the modern financial system. If we believe that money is the product of a natural evolution, then today's banking system, debt mechanisms, central banks, interest rates, inflation, recessions, all of them appear inevitable and natural. Like gravity, something we cannot change. But the truth is far more disturbing and far more empowering. Money never emerged spontaneously from markets. Money has always been the product of power, control, violence, and debt relations. And this truth is not just a historical curiosity. It is critical for understanding the power dynamics that shape the money in your wallet, the debt on your credit card, the numbers in your bank account, and even your dreams today. Now let's explore what this truth really means, how it has functioned throughout history, how it affects you today, and what it means for your future. Because understanding this story isn't just about knowing the past, but about answering questions like who controls you today, why you're constantly in debt, why you're getting poorer the more you work, and how you might break out of this cycle. First, let's completely dismantle the barter myth, because without doing so, nothing else makes sense, and the power of this myth still persists. In the 18th century, Adam Smith described a famous scenario in The Wealth of Nations. In primitive societies, a butcher wanted to trade with a baker who needed bread but didn't need meat, so the trade failed. To solve this double coincidence of wants problem, people invented a universally accepted medium of exchange like gold and silver. This story sounds so logical, so intuitive, that no one questioned it. Economic science was built on this narrative. Even today, most economics textbooks begin with this story. However, in the 20th century, anthropologists, archaeologists, and historians studied societies all around the world. From Polynesia to Africa, from Native American communities to Australian Aboriginal societies, from the Amazon to Siberia, and they failed to find a single barter society. Anthropologist Caroline Humphrey wrote in 1985, "No example of a barter economy, pure and simple, has ever been described." David Graeber, the renowned anthropologist and activist, wrote explicitly in his book Debt, "The first 5,000 years, the barter economy is a fantasy. It never existed." So how did people actually trade? The answer is simple, but shakes the foundations of economic theory, through debt systems. In small, early communities, people were bound by social obligations. Today I help you, tomorrow you help me. Today I give you food. In the future you'll give me some. This season you help me with my field. Next season I'll help you with yours. This was a debt system, but not denominated in money. It was denominated in trust and social memory. No one demanded immediate payment because everyone knew everyone else. Communities were small, and everyone knew what everyone was doing. If someone failed to repay their obligations, they lost social reputation and were excluded from the community. This is where the real origin of money lies. Money emerged as a byproduct of large-scale societies, empires, professional armies, and systematic tax collection mechanisms. The earliest forms of money, debt records on clay tablets in Sumer, grain receipts in ancient Egypt, silver shekels in Mesopotamia, bronze coins in China, all emerged in the same way. A central authority, a king, an emperor, a priestly class, a bureaucracy, wanted to collect taxes, created a standardized unit of payment, and forced people to use it. Money was not invented by the free market. It was invented by the state. And more importantly, it was enforced by power, backed by a monopoly on violence. In Sumer, if a farmer failed to pay taxes, his land could be seized and his family members sold into slavery. In Rome, if a peasant failed to pay tax debts, he himself became a debt slave. By some estimates, 1/3 of the Roman Empire's population consisted of debt slaves. Money was not just a medium of exchange. It was a chain that bound people to a power mechanism, kept them under control, and extracted their labor. And it's the same today. You must work to receive a salary, earn money to pay rent, work even more to pay off credit card debt. Everything keeps you inside a system that controls your labor, your time, your energy, and the most productive years of your life. Yet we consider all this natural, inevitable, even freedom, because we were told the barter fairy tale and the concept of the market economy was sanctified. Now let's go even deeper, because this isn't just a historical truth. It's a deep truth that shapes human psychology and behavior. Why is money such a powerful tool of control? The answer lies in the structure of the human brain and psychology. Money is an incredibly powerful instrument that alters behavior, reshuffles priorities, erases values, and even shapes identity and self-perception. Neuroscience tells us that when you earn money, when you receive your paycheck, close a deal, or watch a stock price rise, your brain releases dopamine, just like when you eat food, have sex, use drugs, or gamble. Money activates a biological reward system designed by evolution for survival. But here's the critical point. In small, early human communities, this reward system worked through social bonds and reciprocity. You got dopamine by helping others because that ensured survival. With the invention of money, this system was hacked. Now you can get dopamine not by helping people, but by accumulating money. That's why people work obsessively for money, push ethical boundaries for money, neglect their families for money, sacrifice their health for money, and sell their identities for money. And here's the most interesting part. Money isn't valuable because it has intrinsic value. It's valuable because everyone else believes it is. If tomorrow everyone stopped trusting the dollar, it would become nothing more than a green piece of paper. Money, then, is a collective illusion, a shared fiction, but one so powerful that it rules the world, starts wars, builds empires, and destroys them. As Yuval Noah Harari put it, money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever invented. And throughout history, power structures that understood this psychology controlled societies by controlling money. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church shaped economic behavior by declaring interest, sinful, and usury the work of the devil. Interest bans also existed in Islam and Judaism, and this was no coincidence. It was part of religious power structures. During the Renaissance, the Medici family became the most powerful family in Europe through banking, even controlling popes, shaping art, and directing politics, all through control of money. In the 17th century, the first stock exchanges were founded in Amsterdam, and companies like the Dutch East India Company raised capital by selling shares and divided the world into colonies. This wasn't just trade, it was power built through monetary mechanisms. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the Rothschild family influenced international politics by lending to European monarchies. There's a reason the quote, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws," exists. In the 20th century, central banks, the Federal Reserve, Bank of England, Bundesbank, Bank of Japan, were established and began steering economies by controlling money supply, interest rates, and credit conditions. And today? Today, institutions like the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the IMF, and the World Bank shape the lives of billions by setting interest rates, printing money, issuing bailouts, and imposing structural adjustment programs. These institutions are not democratically elected, are not accountable to the public, lack transparency, and make decisions behind closed doors. They are presented as technical, apolitical, and scientific, but in reality, they are deep political power centers. Your debt, your credit, your retirement, your child's education, your health care, your dream of owning a home, all are shaped by decisions made by these institutions. How much say do you have in these decisions? None. None at all. You simply live with the consequences. This is the true power of money. It puts you into a game. Others write the rules. The referees are their people. You run on the field, but they always win. And worst of all, you believe this game is natural, fair, and meritocratic, because you were told the barter fairy tale and the free market was mystified. Now let's look at the modern financial system, because today's world is built entirely on a debt economy. And this structure is the largest wealth transfer mechanism in history. In 1971, Richard Nixon announced a critical decision. The U.S. dollar would be detached from the gold standard, meaning the dollar was no longer backed by physical gold, only by trust, only by the promise of the U.S. government. This marked the end of the Bretton Woods system and the moment money became fully abstract and fully digital. Today, central banks can print as much money as they want. With a few keystrokes, trillions of dollars, euros, and yen are injected into the economy. We saw this in the 2008 financial crisis when the Fed printed trillions under the label of quantitative easing and bailed out banks. We saw it again during the 2020 pandemic when central banks conducted the largest money printing operation in history, over $5 trillion in the U.S. alone, creating nearly a third of the economy in a single year. But where did this money go? Into the pockets of ordinary people? To workers on the street? No. It went to banks, large corporations, wealthy investors, hedge funds, and private equity firms. Quantitative easing was theoretically meant to stimulate the economy, reduce unemployment, and increase consumption. But in practice, the rich got much richer. Asset prices, real estate, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrencies, art skyrocketed, and the middle class sank deeper into debt. Young people lost hope of owning homes. Retirees watched their savings lose value. If you want to buy a home today, you need to take on far more debt than before 2008, or even before 2019, because monetary abundance inflated asset prices. Is this fair? No. But it's presented as market economics and supply and demand. Here's where psychology comes in. People think, I didn't work hard enough. I'm not smart enough. I didn't make the right choices. I need to learn more. When in reality, the system is structurally stacked against them. Even financial literacy itself is a form of illusion, a control mechanism. You're told to budget, save, avoid debt, invest in your 401k, diversify, think long-term, and none of these are bad pieces of advice. But no one tells you how central banks manipulate asset prices, why real inflation is far higher than official numbers, why food, housing, education, and healthcare costs explode, while consumer price indexes look tame, why the value of your labor keeps falling, why wages don't rise with productivity, and why your father could buy a house on minimum wage, but you can't. Because if you truly understood these realities and sought answers, you would rebel against the system. That's why this is the biggest lie about money. It promises freedom, but makes you a slave. It promises wealth, but traps you in debt. It promises security, but leaves you fragile. It preaches individual responsibility while hiding structural injustice. And all of this is presented as natural, inevitable, and unchangeable, because you are told the barter fairy tale and alternative systems were labeled utopian, naive, or dangerous. History, however, shows us that alternative systems have existed and sometimes worked. In ancient Mesopotamia, regular debt jubilees were declared. When a new king ascended the throne, debts were erased, slaves freed, and land redistributed. Why? Because debt accumulation threatened social stability. Peasants lost land and military strength weakened. This wasn't socialism. It was pragmatic governance, necessary for system survival. In ancient Greece, debt slavery was legal until Solon's reforms abolished it and laid the groundwork for Athenian democracy. Debt cancellation became political revolution. In the Middle Ages, periods of interest bans existed and economies still functioned. Some historians even argue inequality was lower during these times. In the 20th century, social democratic models, especially in Scandinavian countries, combined high taxes, strong social safety nets, free education, and health care with economic growth and high quality of life. Today, economists like Stephanie Kelton of modern monetary theory argue that government debt is private sector wealth, challenging deficit fear narratives. Economists like Thomas Piketty have demonstrated that inequality is not inevitable but the result of political choices. And the cryptocurrency movement, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and thousands of others, seeks to create decentralized monetary systems without banks, based on algorithms rather than trust. Are these systems perfect? No. They have their own problems, power dynamics, and emerging oligarchies. But the key point is this. Monetary systems are not natural laws. They are human-made institutions, and they can be changed. And they have changed throughout history, from feudalism to capitalism, from the gold standard to fiat money, from Bretton Woods to floating exchange rates. Every transformation followed shifts in power balances. And this is where your role comes in. So what should you do? This isn't just information. It requires action. The first step is awareness. Understand that money is just a tool, not an end. That equating human happiness, dignity, and worth with money is an illusion. Money can help you survive and grant certain freedoms, but it does not define you. The second step is understanding power dynamics. Your debt is someone else's asset. When a bank lends you money, it earns interest on your future and buys your labor power. Your rent increases your landlord's wealth. Rising property prices enrich them while you pay more. Your taxes service government debt, fund military spending, and subsidize large corporations. Yet you had no say in how those debts were created or how that money was spent. The third step is financial self-defense. Avoid consumer debt. Credit cards, installment purchases, unnecessary luxury spending trap you. Say no to unnecessary consumption. Marketing exploits your insecurities to constantly tell you you're not enough and must buy more. Take control of assets, if possible. Debt-free housing, education, skills, health, and social networks are real wealth. The fourth step is collective awareness and organization. You can't change this system alone, but collective action is powerful. Unions, cooperatives, local currencies, mutual aid networks, political movements. History shows us that every major advance, the abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, the 8-hour workday, Social Security, environmental protections, came through collective struggle. The fifth and perhaps most important step is constant questioning. Ask, why is there inflation and who benefits? Why are interest rates high or low and who gains? Why did housing prices rise so much and who won? Why don't wages keep up with living costs? Why are banks rescued in crises but individuals aren't? Why do tax havens exist, and why do the wealthy pay less tax? Seek answers, examine data, explore alternative explanations. Because the history of money isn't just a lesson about the past, it's the key to the present and the future. If you hold that key, you can see the game. And once you see the game, you're no longer a pawn. You're a player. That is the biggest lie about money. They told you that you're just a consumer, a worker, a debtor, that the system is bigger than you and can't be changed, so just adapt. But you are far more than that. You are the source of the labor, time, and consent that keeps this system running. And if you withdraw that consent, if enough people withdraw it, the system collapses. History proves this again and again. The Roman Empire collapsed through currency debasement and loss of trust. Weimar Germany collapsed through hyperinflation. People carried money in wheelbarrows and still couldn't buy bread. The Great Depression of 1929 erupted through loss of confidence. The 2008 crisis began with loss of trust. Mortgage markets collapsed, banks failed, and millions lost their homes. Now it's your turn. Will you see this truth, or keep listening to the Barter fairy tale, believing in the invisible hand of the market, and blaming yourself for not working hard enough? The choice is yours. But remember, ignorance is no longer an option, because the truth is right in front of you. The biggest lie about money was that you thought it was natural. Now you know, money is a power relationship, and like every power relationship, it can be changed.